What if I told you that the most hated tax in politics right now might actually be the one thing that saves the American economy? Tariffs. Yeah, the word alone sounds like bad news for your wallet, but behind the headlines, there is a much bigger story. Jobs, factories, national security, and maybe even lower income taxes. Today, we're unpacking Trump's tariff strategy, the boldest economic move in decades, and asking the real question: is this another tax grab, or will this be the blueprint for America's comeback? Let's find out. Let's go.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror. Where future success is reflected in our knowledge of fixing the one thing we can control, ourselves.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror, and thanks for joining me today as we continue to work to improve the one thing that we can control, ourselves. Here at the Financial Mirror, it is not about the numbers and spreadsheets alone, but about transforming and educating you on money so that you can make smarter financial decisions. If this is the first time you're joining in, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube to be notified of all the new episodes as they release. If you're listening to this on Rumble, don't forget to follow the channel and like the video. And on any podcast platform of your choice, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. So when you hear the word tariff, what comes to mind? Probably taxes, higher prices, or maybe something about trade war on the news. But what if tariffs are more than that? What if they are actually a part of a bigger plan, a strategy that potentially could bring more jobs back to America, protect our local industries, and maybe even reduce how much we pay in income tax down the road? Today, I want to break down President Trump's new wave tariff policies and what they are and why they could be being used. How have they worked in the past? Why are people so fiercely against them? And while others believe they could lay the foundation for a stronger, more self-reliant American economy. I want to go through this because a lot of people have already made up their mind on what Trump's tariff policy looks like and what the outcomes are going to be. And that's where I would tell you that there are two sides, very distinctly two sides to this whole debacle. But the thing is that both sides have a point and both sides are correct with their points. The thing is that when you really break it down to understand where do you fall, or maybe you're in the gray middle like most people, you need to know what the other side is right about because both are correct. So I want to break all this down because there is a lot to unpack, and I'm going to try to run through this as fast as possible because I think there's a lot of good information here. So let's start off with what tariffs really are. So at their core, tariffs are taxes that are placed on imported goods, but it's not always the foreign country that pays the tax. Sometimes it is a U.S. company that kind of burdens some of that tax load. But a tariff is really and truthfully a tax imposed by one country on the goods and services that it imports from another country to influence it, raise revenue, or protect competitive advantages. All these things are sometimes good and sometimes bad, right? And I think that's why this is such a very hot headline, is because you can really invoke rage on both sides of a political aisle by mentioning tariffs. Because once again, both have a valid viewpoint, both are semi-correct, and it really is how you look at it. Like, what do you care more about on which side you're going to be more align with? And we're going to break all this down. But most importantly, governments impose tariffs to raise revenue. They impose tariffs to restrict foreign competition and protect those domestic industries. All of those things are why tariffs exist. So think of it like if a business wanted to buy $10 worth of car parts from China, and there's a 25% tariff on those car parts. Well, now those car parts technically cost $12.50. And sometimes, but not always, the extra cost could get passed down in a higher price for the final product to the consumer like you and me. That's very well possible. Not always, but very well possible. So tariffs aren't just about revenue. They've historically been used for tons of things, but it kind of went over the three: revenue, restrict foreign competition, protect those domestic industries, and the third one is being using leverage and trade deals with other countries. So when Trump says tariff is his favorite word, he's not being dramatic. He's using a very traditional tool to pursue a more modern economic goal. Okay. So he has a business mindset, and tariffs have a business construct, right? For many business owners, when you're looking at how we've done business forever and you hear tariff, well, there is going to be an increased cost. Is it going to fall on you as the business? Possibly. Is it going to fall on the actual country that's exporting the good? And possibly. But it does create some worry in the country and definitely in America. It creates some worry when we think about tariffs. So that's one thing, right? So President Trump is loving the word tariff, and he's using the word tariff. But he sees tariffs as a way to fix what he calls a broken trade system. In 2024 alone, the U.S. had a $213 billion trade deficit with the European Union, right? That means we bought way more from them than they got from us, okay? We bought way more from them than they got from us, meaning we imported more goods than we exported goods, right? So now think about that and think about all the headlines you've seen. If we imported more goods and there's a higher tariff on imports than we exported, and there's going to be some retaliation, right? Like companies or countries are going to retaliate and add tariffs to our exported goods. If we're importing more than they're exporting and the tariffs are the same, who wins, right? The U.S. wins, right? The U.S. wins in that case if imports are more than exports, right? The tariffs we're imposing on their imports, if we're doing more of that, then the tariffs make sense, okay? So don't always fall into the headline where it says, well, they're doing retaliatory, tariffs on us as well. Well, possibly, but if we're importing more than we're exporting, we're still netting positive, okay? So his solution to all of this, and Trump sees it as a problem that we're definitely becoming more reliant on imported goods. His solution is to make foreign goods more expensive through tariffs. And so what does that do? Well, it makes American-made products more desirable to organizations, right? So companies are going to want to make American-made products so they can compete and they can have possibly this American-made option that's more affordable, right? So what has he done? Well, the biggest things, and there seem to be changing daily, right? In true Trump fashion, they are changing daily. What's being had tariffs imposed on it is changing daily. All these things, but so far, we've got the 25% tariff on imported vehicles and parts from Canada, Mexico, China. We've got the 10% tariffs on Chinese goods across multiple different industries: electronics, machinery, consumer products, all those things. We've targeted steel and aluminum imports with 25 and 10% tariffs respectively. We've threatened a 200% tariff on European alcohol in retaliation for proposed 50% tax on U.S. whiskey. Trump has also invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, declaring that certain imports, especially in the auto industry, pose a threat to national security by weakening that domestic production and making the U.S. too reliant on foreign suppliers. All of these things are headlines, and all these things Trump's doing, right? All of it is in the news. You're seeing it, and it's happening, right? It's happening. And I mean, we're look at this, but the market. I did an episode a few weeks back about the stock market and what's happening there. And this past Friday, we had another huge downturn in the market, right? So there is a lot of volatility in the market with people just not really understanding or being sure about what's going on. So Trump's doing a lot with tariffs, and it's leading to a lot a lot of anxiety around what happens next. So let's talk about the other side of this whole debacle, right? The cost we don't always see. And this is where it becomes interesting, because there is this hidden cost of cheap imports, right? Because when it's cheaper to build things overseas, what do companies do? Well, they move their operations abroad. And what does that mean for America, right? So if we were making a lot of things, like let's use the automobile industry, for instance. We were making a lot of automobiles in America, right? And I'm going to use this kind of through an example. I pulled up some data to show you. But, in 1985, 97% of cars sold in the U.S. were made in American-owned factories, right? Made in American-owned factories. And that has decreased drastically. And I found this article from Vanderbilt, and it just talks about the decline of the U.S. auto industry. And a lot of it is about the production and about how strikes and things of that nature led to businesses kind of dispersing and kind of having parallel production in this geographically spread out, setup, so that if one of the production areas of parts went on strike, well, you got two others potentially, if you had three total, that could make parts and ship them out. Well, what does that do? It completely derails innovation, because you're not as nimble when you, and I'll share this article in the show notes, but you're not as nimble if you are focusing on production and not on innovation, right? You're not as nimble. You can't maneuver to be an innovative automobile industry if all you're doing is worried about producing what is today, right? And hopefully that makes sense. But you're not even thinking about tomorrow. You're just trying to execute today with workers showing up to work and making the parts for your car, right? That's all you're worried about. So that messed up the American automobile industry. And so what happened? Well, we are really seeing a decrease in the amount of job openings for automobile industry. And I pulled this up, and this is just a quick overview of job openings from 2010 to 2025. You can see that job openings were around 4.8% in 2018, and they were declining, right? They were declining before COVID. What happened during COVID? What happened during COVID in the automobile industry? Everybody wanted a car, right? Like the lots were just empty. Like they were ghost towns. So what happened? You had a huge spike in job openings because they needed people to make cars. Like they were just needing people to make cars. Like anybody, just come make a car. And then in 2022, 2023, what happened? Yeah. Job openings went away because the demand went away. You weren't having to make as many cars. So now we're right back down there, just south of what we were in 2018, the 4.8%, and we're sitting at 4.6% right now. And jobs are declining. Jobs are declining for the automobile industry. What does all this mean? Well, the automobile industry is moving its production overseas. It is. I pulled up this, and I'm not even going to butcher the name of this college, their business school, but it's the American University of Washington, D.C. And they do this little auto index rankings. And let me just pull that up. And it's very interesting, though. It talks about the percent of vehicles, and you can actually look at some of the top vehicles and what percent of their production is in America. And it drops quickly. So Tesla is probably the number one company that makes a majority of their vehicle in America, right? Over 80%. So the Model X is 80, Model S is 80, Cybertruck's 82.5, all the way up to the Model 3 Performance at 87.5% total domestic content, meaning that it's made all in America. 87.5% of the Model 3 performance is made in America, right? Tesla. Top vehicles are made right here in America. Next up is the Ford Mustang, making those 80% of those in America, but they drop so quickly. You've got General Motors down here, 75.5, and I can scroll down, and this is where it just gets gruesome. When you see things like GM making this Cadillac CT5 69%, you see the Escalade, you see the Silverado Crew Cab, General Motors 68.5% made in America, right? We have offshored our automobile industry, and it keeps going, right? The Ford Escape, 66%. The Highlander, the General Motors XT6, 65.5. Keep going. The Ford Explorer, 63.5. And I could keep going. There's more Fords down here. The Ford Bronco, the old reliable Ford Bronco, 59% made in America. It's crazy. It really is bananas. Look at this GM Silverado, just barely over half of it made in America, right? And I bet you that's for a commercial right there, because they can say a majority of the vehicles made in America because it's 51.5, right? So, anyways, you can see that we have declined in the automobile industry, and that was one of our greatest industries for many years, back with railroads and coal and all that. Automobile is right up there with it. So what does all this mean, right? What does all this mean? Well, all this means is, and how does tariffs apply, right? We talked for 5 minutes about an automobile industry, but why does that matter? Well, it matters because of one specific thing, is that for as long as we are offshoring and we are going abroad for all of our, or majority of our manufacturing and our production of domestic products used in America, we are cutting down jobs. We are cutting down the ability to have to hold that production here in America and retain more of our money, because we are getting charged a tariff on what we are importing. Right? Other countries charge tariffs. Like we're not the boogeyman charging tariffs. Many countries charge tariffs. So we're paying tariffs on these parts, and you're paying the cost on the vehicle, right? 51.5% of the Silverado is made outside of the US, and it's an $80,000 truck. I don't know how much it is. I haven't looked for a new vehicle in forever. Like probably 10 years. And so I don't even know what they cost now. I just know people talk about that $80,000 truck is the norm. So if it is, only half of it's made here. So what can you imagine? A lot of that is cost already. So don't think that, and don't believe this headline that by charging a tariff, costs are only going to go up. They could, but you could also force General Motors to potentially say, you know what, those jobs that we're cutting, no, we're bringing those back. We're going to hire more American workers. We're going to get more people involved in production here in America, and we're going to up that from 51.5% to 61.5%. And that's a small win, right? There's jobs included in that production gain. So that's why this is important. That's why that side of this argument is correct, is that you make it cheaper to do these things in America, companies will be forced to do things in America and not offshore. And the reason they ever got offshore is because it was cheaper to do it there, right? So just bringing them back here. The biggest thing that really led to this was COVID-19. COVID-19 led to a lot of this reality that, whoa, wait a second, we are very reliant on our imported goods. There was, if you think back, we couldn't get, PPE, personal protective equipment, right? Like we couldn't get that. We couldn't make ventilators. Our supply chains, the global market just came to a halt, and we were struggling to get the things we needed for COVID-19, right? So those shortages of the personal protective equipment and ventilators and pharmaceuticals and medical supplies, all of those, much of which are made in China and India, we were struggling to get them. Why? Because we were so reliant on imports. So Trump's argument is this: if we don't bring some of this production back to America, we're not just vulnerable, we're at risk. We are at risk of all that supply chain problems that we heard about for years, all of that happening again. Tariffs are his way of pushing companies to rebuild capacity on U.S. soil, so the next time we face a crisis, we're not stuck waiting on some foreign factory to come through and get us those supplies that we need, right? There is a lot of data around that. So one of the items that I was going to show was the setup for our trade balance, right? Our trade balance. And this just shows you that, and this is, trade balance is simply, exports versus imports. So this external balance on goods and services equals exports of goods and services minus imports of goods and services, right? So what does this show right here? Well, you can see that this negative number is going lower and lower, meaning that it's growing. And this is from 2018, so pre-COVID. We were importing way more than we were exporting, right? And all the way up to 2021, that's only going up. It's only going up. We are still importing way more than we are exporting. And, so when that's a positive number, it means that your country is exporting more than it imports, meaning it has a trade surplus. When that's a negative number, the country is importing more than it exports, meaning you're at a trade deficit. So the U.S. has been running at a trade deficit for all of these years listed and continues to run at a trade deficit that's been growing significantly between right here, 2019 and 2022. So this means that the U.S. is importing a lot more than it's exporting during all these years, and that continues to go up, right? So I say all that to say that it's time. It's time that we begin to think about how can we flip that? How can we start to operate in a trade surplus? How can we get to the point where we are exporting more, where companies are making things here in America and we are exporting them to the world, right? If you think about like quality, what's the number one thing that people think about? Oh, that's made in China, right? Well, what if, and let's think about the other side, right? Let's think about the other side of that coin. When someone says, oh, that's made in America, what do you think? Maybe there's some pride in there. You're like, I'm proud that this is made in America. But there's also probably a little bit that you're like, well, if it's made in America, it's probably better quality. That goes through a lot of people's head. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant, but it goes through a lot of people's head. So what if we could sell that? What if we could sell that this is made in America, so you can expect it to be higher quality? What do we say? If something is higher quality, it demands a higher price, right? That's fair. It's a fair assumption. Better cars cost more, some because of name, but you would assume because it's a higher quality. It has something there that's worth the price tag, right? I can't speak for Lululemon. I've never owned anything Lululemon. I don't know why that's so expensive, but I guess it's higher quality. I don't know. But anyways, the thing is that Trump wants to bring tariffs in to change this, to put us in a trade surplus so that we are indeed exporting more than we're importing. So now I've talked enough about why one side is right. Let's talk about why the other side has a point. The criticism, because they are real and they deserve a fair look. Economists warn that tariffs can raise consumer prices, disrupt markets, and provoke retaliation from other countries, sparking trade wars that can hurt Americans. All of these things could be true. They could all happen. Consumer prices could raise. Yes, very well possible. Until if an organization has built and relied on external importing of parts or goods to create their final product, and that is disrupted and they have to adjust, there will be some temporary price hikes that happen. Yes. Now, is that always the case? No, that's not always the case. but it absolutely can happen. So there's truth to that. It's not a lie. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it is. There may be price increases. Yes. Could markets be disrupted? If we're talking the stock market, you can look at the last month and know that markets are not ecstatic about tariffs. And I would say that there's a lot of factors in play, but I think a lot of the angst, a lot of the anxiety that comes in the market right now has a lot to do with the some probably distrust, but some probably uncertainty of how tariffs will play out. So markets are disrupted. So yes, that is true. Could this provoke retaliation? Absolutely. We've already seen it. We've already seen countries. We've seen Canada talking about it. We've seen Mexico talking about it. We've seen China talking about it. We've seen all of these countries talking about them just increasing the tariffs that we pay on what we are exporting, right? So yes, can that result in retaliation? Yes, we're seeing it. So all of those things are true. They are 100% true. We've seen it. But here's the nuance. The nuance is that several studies, including one from the U.S. International Trade Commission, found that while certain prices rose temporarily, the overall impact on inflation was minimal. Others say tariffs actually stimulated more domestic production without long-term consumer pain. What I'm here to tell you is that that is a true argument. And if your stance is that you don't want to feel like, some people are just in a position right now where financially, if things went up like a few dollars, like it will impact them. Yes. Like, and I could see where you could look at this and be like, I can't take another $50, $100 added to my budget. I don't have it. So I could see why that would create some anxiety, right? I can see that. On the other side, you have this other group in camp saying, well, like I want to see, increases in American jobs. I want to see increases in American production. I want to see all of these things. So that side can be true. Both of these sides can be true, and you could be on either side. And I would not see a problem with why you're there. You probably have a good reason for why you agree with one or the other. The one thing that I would tell you not to let be a part of your decision is I don't like Trump, right? Because that's irrelevant. Like, who leads is irrelevant, right? There's policies that come out from both sides, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. They're all politicians. Let's just say what it is. But what I'll tell you is understand what the policy is, what the tariff policy is, and pick a side, because there's a valid argument for both sides for how it's going to impact you. The thing that I would tell you is understand it completely. So when we talk inflation, we talk tariffs. Trump's tariffs, he did them back in 2018, 2019, I forget. But, in fact, when that happened, inflation stayed low. The customs duty revenue doubled. Stock markets took a hit back then, just like they're doing today. And companies actually struggled to pass costs to consumers, right? That was mostly due to Americans hate price increases. They do. So what happens when the price of that thing that they used to buy goes up? Well, they stop buying it. And what do companies have to do when the demand goes down and their supply is still high? They lower prices so that demand can go back up. So what happened? There was a net neutral cost change in price. So what I'm here to tell you is that I understand if tariffs are causing you angst. I got it. But I would also tell you to look more into it to make sure that you've got a good understanding, because some of the outcome is of not having high tariffs in place is more jobs moving abroad, more reliance on external or imported goods for America to run. Both of those are good at times, and they can really slap you in the face when things like COVID-19 happen. So understand that while there may be some short-term pain with inflation, potentially didn't happen last time. I'm not saying it couldn't happen next time. There is also an understanding that retail competition is brutal. So some companies are going to eat the tariffs. some companies going to work with their foreign suppliers to help kind of share or the absorption of the cost. Like companies will have to react, and the answer is not going to immediately just be pass it to my consumer, because the consumer will shift and they'll go somewhere else. They will. So just know that there's a lot to come. Now, as I kind of wrap this up, and I challenge you, please leave comments in the comment section. Really curious of what other people are thinking about this whole thing. But what I would tell you is this: is as we're thinking through this, I would say that there's a lot of good that can come out of it. And one of the last pieces that I was going to talk about was just one of the things that Trump is talking about is he's floating around this idea of replacing parts of the IRS with an external revenue service where they would collect the federal revenue from tariffs instead of payroll taxes, which you pay today with your income taxes. And what that would mean to you as a consumer would be that you would have more money coming into your home from your paycheck, because you're not going to be paying the taxes. And that money would be coming into the government through foreign products, right? So that's kind of the idea. Now, one of the fair arguments that people will bring up is that, well, the amount of money that is paid by income tax, tariffs have not historically been able to fund that. And so I would challenge you a little bit on that argument, right? Because the thing is this. One of the main reasons that people are saying that is that Trump is floating this idea that says if you make over $150,000, then you won't pay income tax. And people are saying, well, that's not sustainable. And I would tell you you're wrong. That is sustainable, and it's nuts that you would think that it's not. If you look at the numbers, you would be crazy to think that it's not sustainable. And I would tell you this, that there's not too much that needs to get the gap closed if you're only talking $150,000. So when we look at how much do people tax, or how much do people pay in taxes, your high income taxpayers pay a majority of the federal income tax. So there's no numbers in here. This is only percentiles, right? But if you look at these percentages, I'm assuming and making an assumption here, and I just went off the data up here at the top that breaks down kind of number of returns, average income taxes paid, that type of breakdown. And I would tell you that a majority of the people that make $150,000 or less are in this 50 to 25% and bottom 50%. So there's your 150,000 people down here. So that means that the people that would be not paying income tax is like 13% of the economy, or 13% of America. 87%, losing my mind. 87% of income tax would stay the same, potentially changing if rates change and what income tax rates are. But you're really talking 13% not paying income tax. 87% are still paying their income tax. So I would tell you it is sustainable. So don't let that one nudge you. So if you're like, yeah, I don't want to pay income tax, I'm not going to make more than $150,000, I want that, then you could just say, yeah, I love this tariff policy, right? Because you don't want to pay income tax. I would just tell you that most people make less than $150,000, and a majority of your taxes are paid by the rich. A majority. The top 1% pay almost half of federal income tax. Like, it's bananas, truly bananas. So anyways, all that's to say that if Trump's tariff vision comes to life, what would America look like 10 to 5 years? I don't know. But what I would expect to see is more U.S. manufacturing occurring, more of America's products more products used in America being produced in America. I would see less reliance on imported goods. I would expect to see a trade surplus where you're exporting more than you're importing. And I would honestly see a change in how we do taxes today. That's what I would expect to see in 5 to 10 years, for sure. I don't know how fast all that happens, but that's what I expect to see, because there will be some bold changes happening, and we'll see what happens. So in the end, tariffs are just a tool like any tool. It can help or it can hurt depending on how and why it's being used. So here's the question for you. Do we want an economy that's cheap and convenient, but fragile, right? Because it's solely reliant on imports. Or do we want one that's a little tougher in the short term, but more secure, more resilient, and more American in the long term? So there's no simple answer. Both sides can be right, but understanding the full story definitely helps make better decisions. So thank you for watching. It went a little longer than I normally go, but hopefully this helped. And hopefully this kind of gave you a little more information about tariffs, or at least gave you something new to consider. So drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and be sure to like, subscribe, and leave that comment. Just support the channel. So thanks for tuning in. Until next week, continue improving the one thing you can control: yourself. Peace.
Well, that wraps up today's Financial Mirror. Join us next week as we continue to work on ourselves, change our mentality, and to commit to achieving the success we always envisioned. Regardless of your platform, help us grow as a community. Please like, subscribe, and share with the people in your lives.